the boy who broke stone. They say Michelangelo never cried at funerals. Not even his own brothers. But once, just once, someone saw him weep. Not for a person. For a block of marble. Florence, 1485. He was 10 years old. Thin. Dirty. Left alone in a dusty workshop while his father argued with bankers. A discarded slab of Carrara marble lay cracked in the corner. Most would have seen a ruined stone. He saw a prisoner. He pressed his cheek to the cold surface and whispered, "I know you're in there." That night he stole a chisel from the master's bench. With bloodied hands and shaking fingers, he began to carve. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. 3 days later they found him unconscious next to a rough shape, half body, half dream. A face barely formed. Eyes not yet open. His father beat him for the theft. But the stone never left him. Learning to bleed for beauty. At 13 he entered the Medici circle. Not as a guest. As a stray dog the nobles could mock. He studied under Ghirlandaio but outpaced his teachers within a year. The brush was too slow. The paint too dishonest. He wanted something rawer. In the Medici garden, among the antique statues, he found his obsession. He stared at broken torsos and missing limbs for hours. Not to restore them, but to understand them. A body is not flesh, he wrote. It is memory carved in tension. Lorenzo de' Medici noticed the strange boy, quiet, intense, eyes like fire trapped in ash. He funded his training. Gave him rooms. Introduced him to poets, architects, philosophers. But Michelangelo never wanted luxury. He wanted silence. And rock. He once told a poet, "I do not live. I excavate." The death of a friend and the birth of rage. Then came the first real blow. 1492. Lorenzo died. Power shifted. Florence boiled. The Medici were cast out. The city plunged into fanaticism and fear. And Michelangelo, now 17, was alone again. He fled to Bologna. Walked for days. Ate what he could steal. Slept in barns. Sketched in the dirt. One night, in a chapel ruin, he met an old stonecutter. The man laughed at his soft hands. Challenged him to split a boulder. Michelangelo shattered it in 2 strikes. The old man nodded. "You carve like someone trying to escape something." Michelangelo didn't answer. But that night he wrote in his journal, "I will make God from stone because men are too ugly. Rome and the marble that bled." Rome. 1497. The Vatican stank of incense and rot. Corruption painted the walls. And Michelangelo, barely 21, was offered a commission. Not a building. Not a painting. A Pietà. He hesitated. Then agreed, but only if he could choose the marble himself. He went to Carrara. Waited days. Rejected dozens. Until he found it, a perfect cold slab 6 feet high. When it arrived in Rome, he locked himself away. For 2 years he barely spoke. He worked by candlelight, whispering to the Virgin and the corpse she held. At night, passers-by claimed they heard sobbing through the stone walls. But none could say if it was the sculptor or the sculpture. When the Pietà was unveiled, the crowd gasped. The folds of fabric looked softer than silk. The dead Christ's muscles still seemed to twitch. But someone called it the work of another. Michelangelo, furious, snuck in at night and carved his name into Mary's sash. The only time he ever signed his art. He later called it a moment of weakness. But others knew the truth. It was the cry of a soul that knew it would never be seen fully, only misnamed. The David that waited in stone. Florence, 1501. A block of marble lay abandoned in the courtyard of the cathedral. Massive. Scarred. Twice rejected by other sculptors. Locals called it the giant. Too tall. Too thin. Too flawed. Michelangelo circled it for days, refusing to touch it. Then one morning before dawn he whispered, "He's already inside." For 3 years he barely slept. In winter he worked wrapped in rags. In summer he sweated until blood ran from his palms. He chiseled not the biblical David, not the boy with a slingshot, but a man on the edge of violence, veins bulging, eyes distant. When it was unveiled, Florence fell silent. Even the critics bowed their heads. One wrote, "He did not sculpt David. He sculpted fear restrained." But Michelangelo said nothing. He simply walked away back into the shadows of his studio. He was never present for applause. Only for stone. The Pope who chained him to the sky. Then came the summons that would nearly destroy him. Pope Julius II, the warrior pope. He didn't ask. He commanded. Michelangelo was to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Paint. He begged to be excused. I am a sculptor. My hands were made for breaking stone, not mixing color. But refusal was not an option. He climbed the scaffolding alone. 4 stories high. Cramped. The ceiling, 12,000 square feet of blank sky. For 4 years he stood bent backward. Paint fell in his eyes. His skin rotted from damp. His legs swelled. His spine twisted. He wrote to a friend. I have grown a goiter from this torture. My beard points to heaven. I feel my brain dissolve into paint. He painted gods in agony. Men being born from mud. Angels confused by humanity. And God himself, reaching out to a man who barely responds. It was not faith. It was confrontation. When it was unveiled, even the Pope wept. But Michelangelo refused to attend. He was already carving again. The dome, the dust, and the darkness within. As he aged, his solitude deepened. He turned bitter, paranoid, would burn sketches before anyone could see them. Spoke to himself in rhyme and prayer. Then, another order came. The new pope wanted a dome for St. Peter's Basilica. Bramante had started it. Others had failed. Michelangelo did not want it. But again he obeyed. He studied architecture like a priest studies scripture. Slept on the floor. Ate bread and water. Refused payment. Refused help. For 17 years he fought gravity. He said, the dome is not a roof. It is the soul of the church trying to rise. Every morning he climbed to the top, 450 feet, just to whisper to the bricks. And when it was done, Rome said, we do not deserve this. But he didn't stay to celebrate. Instead he went home. To marble. To silence. The final figures and the silent tomb. In his 70s, Michelangelo began carving a Pietà again. But this time it was different. No glory. No smooth beauty. Just raw muscle and grief. Christ limp. Mary broken. And a figure holding them both, old, hunched, rough-faced. Michelangelo had carved himself into the stone. But one day something inside him snapped. He took a hammer and shattered the legs of the sculpture. A servant tried to stop him. He shouted, it is not finished. I'm not finished. It is a lie. The pieces were later reassembled by others. But they still show the scars. When asked why he destroyed it, he only said, some things God refuses to release. The ghost in the marble. He kept carving into his 80s. His hands, curled and cracked. His eyes, dimmed but always watching. His breath, ragged but still timed with the rhythm of the chisel. He worked alone by candlelight, often whispering as he carved. You're still in there, I know. Let me find you. In those last years he returned to drawing. Not commissions. Not saints or kings. Just figures trapped in blocks, half-formed. Arms unfinished. Faces turned away. He said they were not sketches. They were confessions. Friends tried to visit. He turned them away. He once told a priest, heaven is a place where the soul is not hidden by flesh. My stone men are closer to heaven than I will ever be. The deathbed in the dust. Rome. February 1564. He was 88. They found him collapsed beside a stone sketch, Christ with no face. His final words were barely audible. I am still learning. The Pope ordered an honorable funeral. Rome wanted a grand tomb. But his will was clear. Send me back to Florence. Let me rest where the river speaks. They smuggled his body out of the city in a wooden crate labeled, art supplies. 3 men carried it at night, past guards, past churches, past monuments he had shaped. In Florence he was buried under simple stone. No fanfare. No sculpture. Just his name carved small. And beneath that soil, dust from his earliest workshop. Legacy of the unseen. Michelangelo left behind more than statues. He left an idea. That art is not to decorate churches but to shatter them. That beauty must ache. That the soul has weight, and that weight lives in the stone. He was not gentle. Not kind. Not easy. But centuries later, people still stand in silence before his David. Before the Pietà. Beneath the ceiling he painted from a twisted neck and a broken back. And some say, if you press your ear to the marble, you'll hear it breathing. Not the stone. The whispering stones. Long after the Sistine ceiling, long after David had become legend, people still spoke of him not as a man, but as a curse. A force. He would wander Rome alone, muttering to the marble quarries, brushing his hands against columns as if listening for veins. Once a young apprentice dared to ask, Maestro, what are you searching for? Michelangelo didn't stop walking. He just said, the ones I couldn't free. He claimed there were souls still buried in stone. But not heroes, Not saints. Ordinary people. The broken, the half-forgotten, the ones no one sculpted because no one remembered them. And in secret corners of his home, he carved their shadows. A grieving mother whose hands never closed. A blind man pressing his ear to the ground. A child curled inside a block, never born. He didn't show them to anyone. He called them the unfinished dead. And when storms shook the city, he whispered to them like old friends. Letters never sent. In his later years he began writing letters he never mailed. One to his dead father. I have built mountains but never heard you say my name with pride. One to a lost love. I carved you in dozens of men. None of them looked back. One, to God himself. You made me see too much. You gave me hands but not rest. What am I if not your knife? You would burn them one by one. Except one. He folded it, hid it inside a hollow sculpture's chest and sealed it forever. No one knows which statue it was. The stone that would not break. At 86 he began one final piece. No one commissioned it. No one asked. A figure emerging from pure obsidian. A material even masters feared. Too hard. Too unpredictable. When asked why he answered, because maybe it will outlast even me. It was not Christ. Not David. Not Mary. It was an old man, hunched, one eye blind, holding a broken hammer. The man had no name. Michelangelo called it Il Disperato. The desperate one. He worked on it until the day he collapsed. When they found him, the hammer was still in his grip. But the sculpture was not complete. Its heart was still trapped inside. And still he carves. They buried him in Florence. But some say he never stayed. There are rumors, whispered among modern sculptors, that a shadow sometimes appears in Carrara at night. That tools shift in their drawers. That statues crack not from time, but from something inside trying to get out. Some claim his ghost never wanted peace. That peace, to him, was silence without stone. And maybe they're right. Because every time a chisel strikes, every time a figure emerges from a block, every time a young artist whispers, I know you're in there, Michelangelo wakes. Not in body, in purpose, and starts carving again.